All right, so let's get
Yeah,
started, Nick.
let's get into it.
Pharmala Biotech CEO Nick Kadysh,
That's right.
MDMA on the CSC is the ticker symbol. Pharmala is a company that I have followed for about a year on, medicalgold.ca. We did an interview, I want to say last summer,
Yeah.
which was very well received. Um, And I just feel like this is a great time to do an update conversation
Totally.
because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
MDMA is pending approval by the FDA for the treatment of PTSD. I want to start there. Let's start big picture.
Sure.
What are you hearing about that? Maybe the timing of it, and what do you think it means for the sector?
Well, look, in terms of timing, we know what the timing is, right? Because the agency, on timing, the agency is very, very clear. So it's August the 11th of this year, less than 4 months away now, very, very close. Um, uh, and so we know when the agency will issue a decision. That is the latest date by which it can issue a decision. They can come back earlier. So there's potential for it to move faster. But in terms of what the agency will decide, nobody knows. Of course, that's like a question for the FDA, and there are lots of really smart people who try to sort of discern what the agency is going to do, and they are often wrong. So you never try to prejudge a regulatory decision. The one thing I will say is, historically speaking, if you look at drugs that have two things, so number one is breakthrough therapy status, which MDMA has, and number two is priority review, which the agency has granted. Historically speaking, those drugs get approved at a rate of about 90%. So I think the odds of the agency approving MDMA for the treatment of PTSD is actually very high.
Yeah, I mean that's the sense I have as well. So, let's say a few months from now, or 2 to 3 months from now, we do get that FDA, approval of MDMA for the treatment of PTSD in a,
Yep.
psychedelic assisted therapy setting. What would that mean for Pharmala?
A bunch of stuff. I mean, look, number one, we are right now, as of this moment, and this could always change tomorrow, but as of right now, we are number one. We're the only company that's producing GMP MDMA, other than Lykos Therapeutics, which is the company that is seeking this approval in the United States. Actually, we're the only company in the world that's provisioning MDMA for the treatment of PTSD today, because we can do that through the special access program here in Canada and through the authorized prescriber scheme in Australia. So that gives us a pretty good position, right, for further legalization. And one thing I can tell you for sure is a lot of different agencies all over the world, they look to the FDA as sort of the prime mover for regulatory matters. And so as soon as FDA approves, there will be a whole host of countries that sort of say, okay, if it's good enough for FDA, it's probably going to be good enough for us. And one thing that we've proven at Pharmala is we can move into new markets very quickly and very effectively. It took, it was February when MDMA, and we moved into that market through our joint venture Cortexa by the 1st of May. So we are sort of ready and raring to go for new markets.
Okay. And then let's talk a little bit about your current, areas of focus. I know you guys are sort of based in Alberta, or at least that's your main area of focus right now. Can you just sort of talk about what the current Pharmala, model is and where you generate your, revenue from?
Yeah. So look, we actually have a very simple model. It's good MDMA today, better MDMA tomorrow. So as I said earlier, we're the only company that's provisioning MDMA for treatment of patients. We also are providing MDMA to, I think at the last count, we are suppliers to about 15 different clinical trials globally. For lots of companies, they view clinical trials only as a cost center. Like, we have our drugs, we're investigating our drugs, and it costs us money to investigate our drugs. For us, we also view them as a profit center because we sell our generic MDMA, LaNeo MDMA, to clinical trials. So they're a profit center for us. So basically, look, today we make MDMA and we sell that MDMA to those people who are legally eligible to hold and use that MDMA. That is patients in those countries that allow it, and clinical trials were approved by the local regulator. We take the profits from that and we drive them into research and development of novel MDMA analogs. So at current sort of moment, we have 2 patent allowances from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. These are composition of matter patents, so they're the basic patent on the underlying molecule. That's for ALA02 and APA01. I know they're super boring names, but that's what it is in drug development. And these are basically new molecules that are better than MDMA at something. Happy to talk about each of them, but we drive the profits from the generic MDMA into novel products with an eye towards development, out licensing, all that great stuff.
Okay, so how much of an investment or how challenging do you think it would be to enter the U.S. market with your current model?
So look, the U.S. market is a challenging market for anybody who wants to engage in it. The reality is in pharma, the U.S. market is generally considered to be half of the global market for in terms of pharma profitability. But it also means that it's a very, very crowded and difficult market to enter. It's expensive to enter the U.S. market. So there's a couple of things here. Number one, Lykos will gain something called data exclusivity in the United States. So for 5 years, no one else can launch a generic MDMA product. That doesn't mean that somebody can't come in with a different molecule. There are pathways to utilize their data for a different active moiety. This is a highly technical regulatory discussion here. But look, it's going to take them a long time to sort of grow the U.S. market. So short term, I would say Pharmala is looking at other countries in the world, and I've discussed this publicly in the past, where we can move faster and more effectively and frankly cheaper than doing a full drug product launch in the United States. Part of the reason we've had the success that we've had is, we often pursue the path of least resistance, and there's lots of great jurisdictions that we want to engage in prior to entering a U.S. drug launch. A U.S. drug product launch is $100 million just for showing up.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. And look, there's no guarantees at the back end of it, right? You're going to start, hopefully selling your product, distributing your product, but this is a new product. It's got a lot of, it's a different modality of care. It's drug assisted therapy. That's tough. MAPS has talked a lot about the difficulty they've had with training therapists for this protocol. This is a big involved process, and I would say this to anybody, but don't take it for granted that an MDMA launch in the United States is going to be a guaranteed overnight success. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, 100%. So social anxiety and autism are major challenges in the world today, and I think it's becoming more and more widespread as people become more isolated on their phones, and social interactions with other human beings in real life, becomes increasingly challenging. Your lead candidate, ALA002, is ready to move into phase 2 for the treatment of social anxiety. Can you tell us more about the status of that phase 2 trial?
Yeah, for sure. To be completely honest, I really wanted to get it started this quarter. We're still trying, but it's going to be tough. Launching a clinical trial is often a challenge. But we're pretty much all the way there in terms of getting all the nuts and bolts ready. So we have a protocol, we have a trial site, we've got a principal investigator, all that stuff is done. I think the real challenge is, as I've said to you, we don't like to do things on our own. We like to partner with people who are like more experienced and better than us at doing sort of these complex projects. And so we're just trying to get the right partners in place to do that trial, but it's pretty much ready to go. And yes, you raised the concept, like the indication that we're going after, which is social anxiety and autism. So a couple of things. One is, yeah, this is a growing indication. It's an orphan indication, meaning that there is no currently available treatment. And this is also an indication that we're very, very confident in. I mean, over the weekend I posted it was kind of an old story, but other researchers that were looking at this indication with MDMA as one of their comparator molecules. The pharmacology of MDMA is not super well understood in the context of this indication, but the efficacy we're very, very confident in. So we do think it's going to help people, and we do think it'll be successful in phase 2.
So you feel that you want to partner with a larger company
100%.
due to the fact that a phase 2 trial costs quite a bit of capital. Is that right?
I mean, partly that, partly this is how like the drug development business works, right? You develop your molecules to the point where they become very valuable assets, and then you go to like large pharma and you say, look, we have these assets. Do you want to work with us to develop them? And so that can really drive development because you gain a lot of expertise. You also get money. I mean, it's not exactly like they're not licensing it for free. So yeah, like I really like that model. I would like to pursue it for sure. And we have been we've been engaged in this process for a little while now. Just takes a long time. Doing deals with big pharma is a very involved and engaged process.
So this is something where you have a bunch of NDAs signed and the conversations are pretty far along.
Well, I mean, I can't talk about things that are under NDA, as you can understand.
Yeah.
But all I can say is we've been engaged in this process for a long time, and we're working on it very extensively.
Okay. And with this, lead candidate, why are you able to skip phase 1?
Okay, so that's a great question. So first, you have to understand a little bit about the underlying chemistry of MDMA, like the pharmacology of it, and what ALA02 is. So MDMA is kind of unique in that it's a racemic molecule, which for those who still remember their high school chemistry, that basically means that when you make the molecule, you actually make two mirror images of the exact same structure. And there's lots of chiral molecules, and basically molecules that have sort of mirror images. There's molecules with multiple chiral centers. That's all. It gets quite complicated. But the long and short of it is MDMA is somewhat unique in that you make two variants of the same molecular structure, but mirror image. And MDMA is unique because not only are they both active, but they're active in very, very different ways. And they actually work synergistically in the brain. So it's not just like 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 equals, pi. And so what we did was we basically did rodent testing on the enantiomers in various combinations until we came up with the one that we have evidence is the best in terms of safety pharmacology and in terms of efficacy in our specific patient population, which is, autistics showing social anxiety. There are actually autistic-like mouse models, BTBR mice. And so that ratio is about 70 to 80% R, 20 to 30% S, and that's what we have patented, is that specific ratio. Because the other ones are worse. They have more side effects, and and they have worse outcomes. And so, like, the reason that we, generally speaking, when we talk about generic MDMA, the reason that we use racemic MDMA is that's what's the easiest to make, right? But that doesn't mean that it's the best in terms of its like physiological effects. But because we are working with the same base molecular structure as MDMA, you have a lot more data to work off of. And so regulators are a lot more permissive about what you can and cannot do. And in this context, we're very confident we've gotten like written opinion that we can go directly into phase 2.
Got it. And that will be done in Australia?
Yeah, we're looking at Australia. I mean, like, there's still a very small possibility that we do it elsewhere if one of our partners insists. But we do a lot of work in Australia. Obviously, we have our joint venture there, so we have a corporate structure. We really like Australia for this type of work.
Okay. I've got a few more questions, but I also want to open up the floor to the audience if they have a question for Nick. So my next question, Nick, would be, how do you view the valuation of Pharmala right now? I mean, in Canada, your market cap is roughly $20 million,
Mm-hmm.
slightly less. I think you just closed a financing for almost $1 million. How should investors view this, and what is the potential upside here?
Well, look, I don't comment on valuation because, as we discussed at the beginning, it's not just based on what my company does. It's also based on macro factors. The XBI, we've actually, unlike a lot of companies in our industry, we've actually tracked the XBI decently well. And the XBI is like the index for biotech companies. Um, Look, I think you can look at our company, for better or worse, you can look at our company as one of two things, right? Because we have two business lines, and different people like our company for different reasons. So I think that if you agree with me that we have some really fantastic intellectual property, then if we prove out our ability to close deals, which I think we have, but of course, it's up to people to decide whether they agree with me. Then that intellectual property is worth a lot, right? Any deal with a pharma company, even a pre-IND, so like a preclinical molecule, usually those kinds of deals are worth, upwards of $5 million. We have a phase 2 molecule and a preclinical molecule. You can decide how much that is worth. Again, if you see the evidence, you buy the evidence, all that stuff. And then we have our generic MDMA business. Generic MDMA business is like really, really interesting because it's super, super unique. Like, we are literally right now the only company in the world that does this. So look, again, I don't comment on valuation because valuation is not solely dependent on us and our ability to execute. But I would put our ability to execute up against any company in this space. Like, I think we've done incredibly well. And keep in mind, we've done it all on a very limited budget. I mean, post raise, we've still only raised like $4 million in our entire lifetimes as a company. Pretty small
Yeah,
considering all
it's
we've been
really
through.
it's really impressive how you've managed to keep the share structure fairly tight and made the capital that you have raised stretch for a very long period of time. I'm just going to throw out my thoughts. I think the phase 2 trial in Australia is a huge milestone for the company. So I think
100%.
when that is announced, the details of it are announced, the timing of it, I would view that to be the number one catalyst that I see for Pharmala. And certainly if your lead, drug candidate has a positive phase 2 in social anxiety, which is the patient population around the world is over 300 million people. I mean, it's massive,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's growing every second. That's a huge catalyst, and I would say that would warrant a valuation many multiples of the current valuation. But that's a big if, because right now we
Sure.
don't know when or how that phase 2 is going to happen. So
Yeah.
I view that to be a very important potential catalyst coming down the pipeline here. The other one, is the FDA approval, of MDMA. I think that's going to be very positive for the medical psychedelic space more
Yes.
broadly. And your stock symbol, it's not an accident, that's your stock symbol. So
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's going to give you a lot of positive free press,
Yeah. Look,
and then it's up to you.
the only other thing I'd add to that, and it's not something that anybody sort of looks for because it's very hard to predict when it comes in the future. But
Hmm.
like last year, Australia basically legalized through the authorized prescriber scheme, and that was like an unlooked for change. Nobody expected it to happen, and then bam, all of a sudden it happened. And so the other thing that I anticipate is this year, beyond just FDA, there will be one or more jurisdictions that come to the same conclusion because the clinical
Mm.
evidence on MDMA is so strong. And then, I mean, like, one thing I can say for sure, look for us to compete incredibly hard to be the prime mover in that jurisdiction, just as we did in Australia. Like, we are ready to go, and in fact, like, pushing in certain jurisdictions to move the ball forward. I was just in Europe, in Holland at the European Medicines Agency a few weeks back, where they had a full confab on psychedelic drugs and clinical trials and approvals. Lots of opportunity outside of just the U.S. I know that's what everybody looks, but there's lots of opportunities out there.
Very good. That's a nice tease. I want to open up the floor if somebody has a question they'd like to ask. But, another question for you, Nick, is, you're the face of the company, but can you tell us a little bit about some of the other key people on the Pharmala team?
Well, like, I mean, one of them is in the audience right now, but our COO, Shane Morris, he was a longtime bureaucrat at Health Canada. He was a chief product officer at Aurora Cannabis. One thing I will say for all of our team, like they're all regulatory experts, because that's sort of how we run the company. We have this baseline belief in regulatory excellence being a key driver for our success. We're in a highly regulated subset of an already highly regulated space. So Shane, Dr. Harpreet, I should say Dr. Shane Morris. Like, everybody in this damn company is a PhD except for me. So Dr. Shane Morris, Dr. Harpreet Kaur, who's our head of research, former Tilray, former Sun Pharma, really driving the ball forward on our novel molecules. And then Dave Purcell, who does our sales. And I should also mention, like, we've got a pretty remarkable board of directors, from our board chair, Jody Butts, who sits on the board of Canada Goose and Tilray, to Dr. Malik Slassie, Dr. Harriet DeWitt. We've actually collected a really great group of people on the advisory and board of directors side, beyond just the folks who work for the company. So, we're always remiss if I don't mention them, but they all do a ton of work, and they all believe in the mission of the company.
Great. One more chance for people to raise your hand and ask a question to Nick. I saw, Terry, you tried, but I didn't get to you in time. If you want to try again. Nick, what's the biggest challenge that you face? What's the biggest challenge? We see a lot of opportunities. The phase 2 trial is an opportunity. The FDA approval is an opportunity. What is the biggest challenge that you face?
Well, look, I personally think that it's the broader sort of operating environment. We're at a low point for biotech, basically in my lifetime. Great time to launch and run a biotech company. We're lucky that we have an established revenue stream, because I think for those companies that don't have that, it's impossible, right? That and valuations are 1/100th of what they were in the height of the pandemic, where everybody was investing in biotech, and a lot of that capital has just fled. So the things that worry me are not things that pertain to Pharmala itself. I think it's just the broader operating environment that concerns me, and I do think it impacts our valuations.
Okay. And final question from me is, how many shares do you own personally? And how about the total board? How much do they own of the company?
Look, I'll direct you to our SETI filings, because we are up to date on those. I will just say that I just bought in our last round. I invested $50,000 of my own money. Our team is very highly compensated with stock options and RSUs, including both the board and we don't pay our board cash. Everything is sort of stock comp. So yeah, look, we try to keep it tight, but for the people who are on the ground doing the work, like the physical labor, the hours, we do compensate them with stock.
Very good. And final question, and we'll wrap it up exactly at the half-hour mark. Can you give us a rough timeline of what investors can expect from Pharmala over the next few months?
Well, look, over the next little while, we are going to be making some announcements pertaining to Cortexa, our Australian joint venture, as that market matures. Over the weekend, there was a trial approved. There was a granting of funds, significant granting, so 3.8 million Australian dollars towards a PTSD trial, for which Cortexa is a partner named in the grant documents. So lots of work going on in Australia, and then of course the ALA trial, which is taking up a lot of time and attention and energy from the team. And then hopefully, of course, in August, the approval of MDMA by FDA, and the associated other approvals that we see from other jurisdictions in the wake of that. So actually quite a bit of stuff that's going to happen is going to have a very significant impact on the company.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of catalysts are lined up here in the second half of 2024. Terry, you can unmute yourself and ask your question to Nick. Bottom left is the mic button. Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Technical difficulties.
It wouldn't be an X space without one technical difficulty.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I got a comment that I'll make, just picking up on something that I saw you tweet
Oh.
today. Which is like so like, look, I don't really like, I maybe I have a different view of investors than other folks, but like I do think that there's sort of like a hierarchy of investors. You had made a comment that like you go on the stock boards and you see a bunch of people like complaining about like the
Yes.
management of companies, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, like I got to be honest, like, so I don't go on stock boards very often. Occasionally, for sure, I've done a whole bunch of AMAs on CEO.ca, as I'm sure you know, but like this is like a concept that is completely alien to me. Like, like the management sucks. They're so dumb. I can do this a million times better, but I love the company. They're just doing so great. Like, the company is just people, guys. If you don't like the
Yeah.
management, you don't like the company. I don't know how else to put that, especially in a microcap.
Yeah, especially in a microcap. The management team is the most important fundamental factor, way beyond anything else. I mean, if you don't like the CEO and you don't trust, the board, then you certainly shouldn't own the stock, regardless of what the assets are. Yeah, so I find it kind of ironic that, I think it's just people want the share price to go up now, not a
Sure.
year from now.
Sure.
And so they think by posting on social media, somehow they're going to get the company's attention, and their advice and their ideas for what the company should do are the right ones, which is quite arrogant when you think about it, that the company, management team, they very often founded the company, and they're pros. Like, this is what they think about all day long. So
Yeah.
why should I think that I know better than they do? And that's when it's good to have a conversation with the company and understand their thinking, and maybe I might have a revelation as to, oh, actually my idea is really not a good one because of A, B, and C, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I really do pride myself on this. Like, I reply to shareholders, but I'll also say, like, there's a hierarchy even within shareholders. Like, there's the people who invest in the actual company. There's the people who buy your shares on the secondary markets, which is like the what the
Mm-hmm.
stock exchange is, and then like I'm sorry, but in my opinion, below that, there's like the guys who are like, maybe hold 15 shares. Like the guy who knocked out Elon Musk's comp package based on like the 3 shares that he owned at
Oh God.
Tesla. So like, look,
That's
everyone's entitled to an opinion. Everyone's entitled to buy a stock, sell stock, whatever you want.
mhm.
But I do, in my mind at least, I do sort of discount the opinions of people based on their actual exposure.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you own more shares, you should have more say, obviously, and
Totally,
then you can vote out the management team if you're really unsatisfied. But most people are just going to sell their stock and not go through all that process. It's
totally.
such a pain in the ass to get rid of an entrenched team. You have to get a lot of other shareholders to see it, the way that you see it, and then vote them out, right?
Yeah, and you really do I mean, in biotech, I actually think that this happens a decent amount because you see you see the assets, right? Like they have a patent on this molecule and they're really like screwing it up. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can understand that. You really see the value in the underlying assets. But like early stage, I mean, you'd really have to have a lot of inside info on sort of the work that has
Mhm.
gone into the molecules to even make a reasonable assessment.
MindMed had a little bit of that going on, and I
Yes, they
think
did.
I think I think that's finally been settled, although I'm not 100% sure. But
Yeah,
that went to trial,
I think it did. Yeah,
and the management team won.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Nick, thank you very much for this update. You know what? Let's do it again when something really important happens.
Sure,
Maybe the FDA approval, comes down the pipe, and we'll do it again.
that'd be great. I'd love to.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. I will post this on my YouTube channel, Goldfinger Capital. Don't ask me today or tomorrow. Just give me a couple days. It takes a little bit of time to do it. And have a great day, everybody. Cheers.